Hello and welcome to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben and with me is...
Jim, otherwise known as Nessie.
Ugh, nah. No. Nah, I would... No. We watched Loch Ness.
From 1996.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing this gift of a film. I, for one, feel enriched and challenged as a moviegoer.
Great. Can I just say, before we dive into the podcast this week, I have to comment on my hair, which is, it's really important. Some of our viewers or listeners, do so in video format. And when my wife saw that I had not put any product in my hair, and she was like, "You're gonna people are going to see you," and I was like, "No one watches. No one watches anyway." And she's like, "Yeah, but some people, like there will be a small select group of people who will see you with the hair." And at that point, it put me into an existential crisis, much like the lead character of this film. And now
nice tie back.
Not right now. I'm concerned about my hair, and I felt the need to comment on it. But no, this is me. This is I'm pure greatest showman. This hair,
unfiltered Jim.
It's unfiltered Jim. So if you are, shall we say, privileged enough to be a video, watcher of the cast, then you're seeing, the Jim Ness monster in his, natural habitat today with no hair product. And look, it seems like my wife might be ashamed of that.
As someone who has known you, let's be fair, longer than your wife, it's definitely not your worst hair. It's middle of the road Jim. Middle of the road Jim. And I, for one, will testify to this.
And I think that is a tangent that we probably didn't need on this podcast, but I felt like I'm going to do it.
It was in your heart and you spoke it.
It was in my heart and I spoke it. And really, that's what the internet's for, isn't it? Yeah. So look, without any further ado, I should probably get to my job and deliver a succinct and beautiful synopsis of Loch Ness from 1996. So you ready for it, Ben?
I was born not for this, but I have developed a technique for listening to it. Let's go.
Loch Ness from 1996, starring Ted Danson, follows Dr. Jonathan Dempsey, a disgraced zoologist who reluctantly travels to Scotland to investigate claims of the legendary Loch Ness monster. Hoping to debunk the myth and revive his career, Dempsey instead becomes entangled in the lives of the locals, particularly innkeeper Laura, played by Jolie Richardson, and her precocious daughter Isabel. As he delves deeper into the mystery of the loch, Dempsey is forced to confront his own skepticism, leading to a discovery that reawakens his sense of wonder and belief in the extraordinary. You got some facts for us on this cinematic delight, Ben.
Boy, do I. Released 1996, directed by John Henderson. Not to be mistaken by Jim Henson, whose company did the creature works in this film. John Henson did Tales of the Riverbank, Two Men Meant to War, and, it's going to blow your mind, Mishi, the Water Giant, which is a Native American Loch Ness monster myth movie. This guy likes water movies. Written by John Fusco, starring Ted Danson, Jolie Richardson, Ian Holmes, James Frayne, Christy Graham as the little daughter. Budget of $7 million, box office of $10 million. Look, I've got one fact just about the cast. This is Christy Graham's only credit that I could find. There is a biologist online with that name who is repeatedly asking people to stop asking her about the movie Loch Ness because she does happen to have red hair as well. But yeah, no, not her. Jim, I have a really pressing question, and I think it may be the most I've ever meant this question. Why did you pick this film?
I picked this film for... This film is baffling to me in a way that I wanted to discuss. Okay, so, and I think it's It's something that I've always wanted to bring up and discuss with someone, and this podcast forces you to discuss these things with me. There's nothing you can do about it. So you are that guy for the next, I don't know, however long this podcast goes. But
Look, I'm honored. Before we dive too deep into the mysteries that are your mind in this movie, I do want to say it's not a bad movie. It is exactly what it presents itself to be, a kind of wholesome movie about a man who is lost himself. There's a romance. There's kind of like a skeptic becomes a believer. It's very Hallmark before that was like really a thing. Um, it's what it is on the tin. The creature effects are for their time good, but now you can't really compare it. That's not really fair. And you said that in the synopsis that Ted Danson's character is a disgraced zoologist. Now he says that in the film too, and he also derides cryptozoologists. He's a cryptozoologist. He chased Bigfoot. That's how he got disgraced.
yeah, well, look, I'm thinking I wondered if you were going to go there, and then I'm like, it's Ben. Of course, he's going to go there. So look, cryptozoology being, and look, I am sorry if I'm going to offend any cryptozoologists out
I'll
there, but
go for it, dude.
it is a pseudoscience, which is a field where you study, mythical creatures that may still exist in the world, or at least this group of people believes that they might. So look, yeah, cryptozoologist, zoologist. At one point, he was a zoologist, and
Yes.
he pursued this route of more unusual options. But look, the reason that I wanted to discuss this movie is really ever since I saw this movie, and I saw it pretty soon after it came out, on VHS at the time, and I was still a child. And even as a child, I remember thinking to myself this question: who is this movie for?
It's a really good question. This movie is for 17 different demographics, and it doesn't hit any of them. It's meant to be a kid's film. It's meant to be a romance movie. It's meant to be a little action adventure. Oh, it's a sarcastic comedy. This movie is all over the place.
And that's why I wanted to talk about it. You ask why this movie? I'm like, this movie is so unusual in the sense that, okay, can I just say, much as this movie was, I think, poorly marketed, I also recognize this movie is impossible to market. It's impossible. Like there's no way to actually say, oh, it's for this group of people, because and look, we'll get into this in a second, but this is actually, no, we'll get into it now. This is another example of the 1990s Australian ratings board fails again. Honestly.
Why? Tell me why.
So this movie in Australia, what rating do you think it carries?
PG.
Nope, G. So this movie carries a G rating.
People almost drown in this movie.
Okay,
multiple times.
Let's go through the list of things that occur in this film. Now, look, honestly, it's not a violent film. It's not an over-the-top film or anything like that. But to call this movie G, the opening scene, you see a man fall over, hit his head on a rock, and die. And you actually watch that occur. Like they don't cut away from that. That is what occurs. There's multiple instances of swearing in the film by the characters. The themes of the movie is about a man going through a midlife crisis, who then takes up in a romantic way with an innkeeper. They have, an adult sexual relationship. All in this G movie, right? Okay, so this
also, to be fair, he also teaches an underage person to gamble. That's the tip of the iceberg.
Plus, there's scenes of threat, there's scenes of mystery. Again, it's just a simple case of this is not a G movie.
There's a good 15 minutes of this movie that's Grand Theft Boat.
Yeah.
Where basically they're trying to the Loch Mafia is trying to run him off the lock. It's a PG, I think. I think it's a good, solid PG.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's wild.
You want some parental guidance for this film.
You want to go, I want to consider my child. I will guide them correctly.
Yeah.
That is what this movie is.
Look, Australian Ratings Board, though, the reason I bring that up, classifying this as G, didn't help, guys. Didn't help with people not being sure who this movie is for, because really, there's so many things about the film that are just baffling in terms of a target demographic. You know, first of all, the movie is actually a drama, which is the first odd thing. Sure, the Loch Ness Monster, spoilers, whatever, you've seen it or you didn't bother, who knows, but it shows up at the end of the film for a little bit, right? But again, it's not a violent scene. It's not a Jurassic Park situation. There's a bit of wonder there. But functionally, this is a man going through a midlife crisis and trying to rediscover himself and the struggles that he goes in order to go through that journey. There is a little girl in the movie, but she's not the main character. So it's not like the main thrust of the movie is
She
the
should be.
yeah, exactly. It's not her story. She's a supplementary character in the story, an important character, but really it's a drama. It's a drama about Ted Danson as he goes through his life. And yet it was marketed as a children's film or even a family film where you could absolutely bring everybody to, which you can't. You imagine your 6, 7 year old, well, A, there's adult themes in it that are inappropriate for them, but then B, they're going to be bored because there's no actual Loch Ness monster in the movie. And the little girl's not in it enough to actually have them sort of resonate with her as a character right the
But
way
Jim,
through.
there's a crazy guy who camps on the beach and abuses everyone that goes past. How is this not for children?
I just, and then there's also the other side plot of James Frain's character who is then talking to John Dempsey's character, and this is the idea of you might become me. You're me 20 years ago, and now I've got all this cynicism. And again, kids are not interested in this. So who might be interested in it? Well, I guess if you then look at their parents, I guess their parents would be interested in it, except that this is a movie about finding the Loch Ness monster. So people who show up to a drama are going to be put off by the fact that this is a movie about the Loch Ness monster, even though it's masquerading as a drama. So the crazy thing is, though, if you can get past the whole idea of who is it for, who is it not for, and you start to look at things like character, story, 3 act structure, it all holds together. It's actually pretty good. It's
Yeah,
just so
it's
confusing.
it's a good like 6 out of 10 movie. It's very presentable as a
Mm.
film. But yeah, if you try to explain this movie to someone to say whether they should watch it or not, it's a rough one even today. You're like, oh man, yeah, it's about the Loch Ness monster. It's not really about the Loch Ness monster. It's actually about a guy who doesn't believe in the Loch Ness monster, whose career's down the toilet and has been forced to search for it.
So you mean the Loch Ness monster is like a metaphor and doesn't actually show up in the
Well,
movie?
no, actually, it does show up later in the movie. It is a real Loch Ness monster that a slightly psychic child is friends with.
That's confusing. Is the psychic child a really big part of the subplot, or is it mostly a
Maybe a
drama?
good total 15 minutes of film total, where basically she just befriends a stranger on the beach.
Yeah, you get it. Like, you take this cut of this movie, you walk into your film studio's marketing department and you say, I got a job for you. And they instantly say, go away. We
It's just
can't
like,
help you.
I believe in you. So there are a couple of things in this film that, again, like, are quite jarring in a strange way. The moment that I realized that if you treated like this, like the hero's journey, that the little girl is the old wizard of the journey, it really threw me for a loop, because you'd think it'd be the guy who looks after the loch, but it's not really. Also, for the first 2/3 of this film, there is one likable character, and that is the little girl.
Mm.
Everyone else is just either abrasive, not friendly, a jerk, sycophantic, just all the most horrible aspects of humanity. The locals are mean and awful and could possibly have killed other human beings to stop them finding a Loch Ness monster in the past based on their behavior in this movie. Like, it is wild to me that the hero, I mean, I get these sort of movies, right? The hero is not meant to be instantly likable, but you're meant to be able to see the redeemable aspects of them, right?
Yeah.
Like, ugh.
I would actually agree that Ted Danson remains unlikable for a long time in this movie. It's not
Longer
just
than he should.
longer than he should. It's not just the first third. And also, it's not just unlikable. He's awful. He's really bad in this movie. He is not a nice person. And really, he doesn't, even though he makes some big swings, he makes some grand gestures, that should go a little way to redeeming him, but not quite as far as it does at the end of the movie. He didn't actually, in my opinion, earn back that level of goodwill based on the kind of awful things that he does and says to people frequently throughout this movie.
The assistant,
James
he is
Frain.
James Frain. Good actor. I've seen him in plenty of other stuff. This character is hard.
This was my first introduction to James Frain, and so I'll kind of always have a bit of a soft spot for it because he's everywhere. He's in some of my favorite movies. I love him. A few years after this, he did Count of Monte Cristo, where I thought he was excellent in that one. So he does a run on Gotham, which is a show that
Yeah.
if you want to talk about up and down, let's talk about Gotham. But James Frain did a really good run on that show. So great actor, and I love seeing him in this fairly early role. Sorry, that's just
But yeah, in these type of movies, the two characters I have the most trouble kind of connecting to are the ultimate true believer and the ultimate skeptic. The two extremes. And they're what are on the screen together for a good portion of this film. And as I said, there's charm to this movie. There's like things to this movie, but that's why to me it's like a bit of a six. And it's also like I understand that this movie cannot exist without it, but you know, you were talking about last week tropes that you find difficult to sometimes watch and things. I hate that the skeptic is always proved wrong. I really do.
yeah.
Like, the skeptic is always treated like the idiot in these movies. I'd like to see a version of this movie where, you know, he's not a jerk about it, but he is right. Like, it's like, hey, you know, maybe Loch Ness isn't real. I'll do my thing. I'll make friends with the community. I'm not going to fully out it, but yeah, it's not a real one. That like could have been a good angle, but yeah, I skepticism is a useful tool in society. In films, it is treated like a death nail. If it's an action movie or a sci-fi movie, the skeptic's going to die. If it's a horror movie, the skeptic's going to die. And in these things, the skeptic's just going to be proved wrong. I want the skeptic to get his day in film. That's what I want. I want a skeptic to get his day. And it does happen from time to time, but yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I feel like so far, if you were to sort of play back what we've talked about, it might seem like I've been fairly harsh on this movie. And I do want to actually take a moment to say, I actually really like this movie. You know, it's one of those things where, like, I look at it now and I do rewatch it from time to time, and I think it holds together. And I quite like the story and the characters. I think that there are some things about it that aren't awesome, like the characterization of Ted Danson's character that we just talked about. And obviously there's the marketing problem of who is it for, but ultimately, as someone who likes cinema, I'm quite happy to say, well, it's for me. I like cinema, you know, and I'm not particularly, I don't mind that there is no target demo for the film. I like that the film exists. And look, I like a creature feature as well. So the idea that the Loch Ness Monster family group actually shows up at the end, I think
that's
is
right.
quite
It's
nice.
Multiples too.
Yeah. I also think that I enjoy the drama of it as well. I actually think that that's an interesting story, and watching this guy as he sort of goes from one extreme to the other, I enjoy all of that as well. It's just, again, it's baffling as to how this ever got greenlit in its current state, because surely everybody should have noticed that they have a giant marketing problem with the movie.
I think part of it comes to in the 90s, there were a spate of films that were specifically American fish out of water in England, Scotland, all that sort of stuff. And I think that probably goes a long way to, in this time period, why this movie got made. Like, you had the star power of Ted Danson. Like, he hadn't reached his final form, if you will. Like I think the Ted Danson we're getting right now is Ted Danson at his peak, like you know, like The Good Place and Curb Your Enthusiasm and things like that. But yeah, like Ted Danson was a bankable star, and it was a really, really popular trope of fish out of water in the UK. Americans just don't get it. Like, and I think that goes a long way to how this movie got made.
Yeah.
And again,
And it,
sorry, I did want to say I don't hate the movie either. The movie is enjoyable. It is a bit bland in places. It is a bit like by the numbers, like as far as like you can see from the start of the movie to the end of the movie exactly what's going to happen. But that's not a bad thing with this type of film. People watch these movies because they're comfortable, because they know where it's going to go. Um, and the only thing that actually really turned me off was the whole like the village Scottish guy who's like, that's my lady. Like, I'm like, that was just a completely unnecessary plot device that he had to overcome. Like, they could have just been mean to him because he was a foreigner.
yeah. Do you want, shall we add Barroom Brawl that's quite violent into the G movie as well? Because that occurs at the
Oh, my
same
man
time.
gets hit with a bottle.
Yeah. Look, I do also want to take a moment to talk about Ian Holm, because I think that Ian Holm's performance is actually great in this movie as the water bailiff, as the foil, if you like, for Ted Danson's character. I actually really enjoy his performance, and I particularly want to highlight now, obviously, even at this point in his career, no one needed to tell anybody that Ian Holm's amazing. He'd already done a number of incredible works by this point. But there's a scene at the end, and it would have been a particularly difficult scene to play for anybody because it's Ian Holm on a bus by himself. It plays out in a single shot with no cuts. And all he's doing is reacting. He's going home. He's dejected because he thinks that he's failed in his quest to keep the Loch Ness Monster a secret. And he happens to look into his satchel. He finds the photographs, and then he has an emotional reaction to it. And it's all wordless. It's all in one shot. It's quite a long shot. And it's a great scene. And every time I look at it, I go, man, that would be hard to play. That would be so hard to actually go through all of those emotions. You have no scene partner. You're by yourself. There's no cuts. So you got to get it. And I actually think it's a really great performance. And it's actually quite an emotional performance every time I watch it, whether you're kind of invested in the movie or not, to watch this guy go through those emotions of that idea that he's very proud, and yet he's then had this boon come to him. I just think it's a great moment. I wanted to highlight it.
Ian Holm, legend. For those of you who don't know, Alien, he plays the original android, and the Hobbit. He's Bilbo Baggins in The Hobbit, and no, sorry, in Lord of the Rings. The other thing, there's a scene a couple before that that I actually think is a really good telling of his ability too. Like all throughout this movie, he's played this really kind of gruff, abrasive, kind of hard man who has respect for the law and the knowledge of the loch. And his last ditch effort to stop the release of the photos is a conversation with Dempsey, or Ted Danson's character. He doesn't drop any of the character work he'd done before in the film. All that character is still there as he's explaining to Ted Danson's character, hey man, like, I don't leave the loch. The last time I left the loch, I hated it. I don't do this lightly. I'm just asking you to kind of not do this because it's not the right thing to do. He uses much better words and there's a written script to it and all that sort of stuff. But I really liked that too, because there'd be a temptation in writing that scene and even acting that scene of completely dropping the mask or the character and just being emotional. That doesn't happen. And that's why you can have that quiet, powerful moment later on the bus. And that's why you can kind of like, it's the character's consistent, the acting's consistent. He's one of the legends, right? Like if you look at him in British dramas and all that stuff through the years, like you're like, oh, it's Ian Holm. Oh, it's Ian Holm. He is everywhere. He's done Shakespeare. He's just brilliant. And in this movie, he does add something. Like sometimes when these kind of old, brilliant actors are in these types of films, they don't really add anything because other than that they're the actor. He adds stuff to this film.
You know, if we're talking about actors as well, I'm going to botch this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. Isn't that great? It must be the internet. But you talked about this particular film being the little girl's only acting credit.
Mm.
And, you know, I listened to an interview once, and I did try and find it prior to this particular podcast, and I couldn't find it. So I'm going off memory instead. But Karen Gillan, who plays Nebula in Guardians of the Galaxy and is in the
Doctor Who.
with Doctor Who and the Jumanji reboot films, actually talks about this movie because obviously there was an open casting call in Scotland, and
Ah.
they were looking for a red-headed girl of about, you know, between, I don't know, 6 to 9 years of age. And I can't remember, this is the part where my memory fails me. I can't remember if she went for it and didn't get it or didn't go for it. But either way, this movie was almost a turning point for her where she was like, oh, I wanted that. You know, I wanted that real bad. And either I didn't go for the open casting call or I went for it and didn't get it. But it kind of almost propelled her, that experience of not getting the thing and not being involved propelled her a little bit on her acting journey. So it's kind of just crazy how that kind of thing happens. This little movie that where the girl who ended up, I think she does a great job actually.
She's really good. She's very natural.
Yeah, but her only acting credit, and yet there was obviously someone else, maybe many someone else's, you know, who didn't get that role, and but have still sort of pursued that career, that idea. So I thought that was an interesting little bit of trivia there.
So I did a bit of digging around because I actually do love the topic of cryptozoology and all those sort of things, even though I don't believe in most of it or believe it has real world answers. But I also delved into movies about the Loch Ness monster. There aren't as many as you would think that are fictional. There's quite a few like segments in TV shows where is it real, is it not, all that sort of stuff. But do you want to hazard a guess on IMDb on movies that reference or are about the Loch Ness monster, where this sits on ratings out of 20 films?
I reckon it's probably number 2.
Incorrect.
Okay.
It
Uh,
is about 16th.
is it? Okay. So I just think that there was a film that came along a few years after this, and if we look at this film as saying it's a marketing department's worst nightmare, there was a version of a Loch Ness Monster movie that came along about 10 years after
I
this
got this, you
called,
ready?
yeah,
The Waterhorse: Legend of the
of the
Deep.
Deep. Yeah, that's the one. So, and that one, that's a marketing team's dream because that's exactly what you want in terms of a family film that actually could carry a G rating and be about the Loch Ness Monster. You know, it's a completely different vibe to this movie. I'm very glad that we have both and that film doesn't mean this one doesn't exist, but I did just want to bring that up to say that that's the version of this that you can sell.
The other one that is rated higher that I've actually also seen as well is Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster.
Right.
It's a
Okay.
classic. Up there
Yeah.
with Scooby-Doo and Laurel and Hardy. But no, look, this film's actually pretty easy to rip on, and it's a bit unfair to continually rip on it. As we've said before, it is perfectly fine. But talking about ripping on films, whenever we look at these films as well, I always look at people's reviews of them. And it hasn't happened a lot where we've just had some really good 1-star reviews, but I found a couple that I'd like to share from you from IMDb. And I'm calling this
Dear.
segment 1-Star Heroes,
Oh
because these are the
dear.
people who think they're hilarious about giving 1 star to a movie.
I'm
Which,
sorry, Loch Ness, for what's about to happen.
which to be fair, very few films in existence truly deserve 1 star.
I don't think
Just
this
throwing it
film
out there.
deserves 1 star.
Absolutely not. It's a good 2.5 to 3. All right, number 1. Bloody terrible nonsense movie, ruined by Big Chin Danson. He irritates the bojangles out of me. 1 star.
Wow. I think that person's mostly not liking Ted Danson.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
one
know.
of the, it's like people who don't get Tom Cruise or it's just a Ted Danson guy.
It's like the
This
movie's bad because that person's in it.
this next person is expressing, I think, really a childhood trauma. This film, which robbed me of my childhood belief that all films could be great. Even as an 8-year-old, I could tell this was a terrible film, which made me rue my decision not to watch Tungsten Checks In at the cinemas. Thankfully, we had free tickets, so we didn't waste our money, only our time. 1 star. And those are your 1-star heroes for this week. People who feel like their opinions matter and give movies 1 star.
Look, The first guy just didn't like Ted Danson, and the second guy, it's your own fault. Of course, if you're 8, you should have watched Dunstan Checks In. Like,
But we solved this guy's problem, the marketing dilemma.
Yeah.
How was he meant to know?
It's true. So yeah, okay. Look, I don't know how I feel about the 1-star segment, but look, I'm glad that you seem excited about it.
Well,
so it's
look,
good.
let's counterbalance that with a good 2.5-star off the top of my dome Ben review. This movie is pleasant and watchable. Would recommend for other pleasant and watchable people. 2.5 stars.
It's the vanilla Chat GPT of reviews.
Right, that wasn't even Chat GPT. That was straight out the dome. I am AI.
Well, look, I mostly wanted to talk to you about the conundrum of this movie. I quite like this movie. I'm glad it exists. It's odd. It's unusual. And thank you for being forced to endure it with me.
Not a problem. It was a pleasure. Before we get on to what next week's movie is, let's just talk about where you can find us if you want to listen or watch us. If you want to have a listen, you can do so in 3 places. There is Spotify and iTunes just to listen to us, and YouTube. You can find us in those 3 places at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. If you do find us there and you do enjoy what you see, if you don't enjoy what you see, if you want to be a 1-star hero and leave a comment, do so. Leave a movie we should watch, and we'll happily do so and add it to the wheel of adventure. Like, comment, subscribe. Be the people that we need you to be. If you just want to follow us on social media, you can also do that as well. We have our TikTok, which is Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures, and we also have our Instagram, which is Jim_and_Ben. Well, you played a little game of choice last podcast with me, making me choose a film. I'm not going to make you choose the film, but I'm going to make you guess the film. I've written some clues to next week's film. Clue number 1 is a period piece set in Victorian England.
Okay.
It's an adaptation that takes a timeless 19th century novella and adds a twist.
Okay, yeah, I'll need the third clue.
The story follows a greedy, cold-hearted businessman who has a string of events that leads him to a life-changing journey. This version combines holiday magic, musical numbers, and a mix of comedy that helps tell this classic tale of redemption. The title combines the spirit of the holidays, a take on a Dickensian classic, with kindness, generosity, and change.
All right. Yeah, that was way too many clues. But are we watching A Christmas Carol?
We're watching The Muppet Christmas Carol.
I didn't even want to say Muppet because
Are you not a Muppet guy?
I don't like the Muppet Christmas Carol, man. Like,
I love the Muppets, man.
My wife's gonna love you. She loves that movie, and she wants me to watch it.
Jim's wife.
She wants me to watch it like every year, and I'm always like, nah, let's not.
Guess what you have to watch this year? And I'm mandating Jim's wife has to watch it with you because I'd love to hear her take on it through you.
She's gonna be so happy. I'm less happy.
This is my second favorite Muppet movie of all time, and my second favorite Christmas movie of all time.
Well, I'm glad you like it.
For those of you who aren't watching YouTube, I'm dancing, baby. I'm dancing like a Muppet.
Look, honestly, most people the world over love this beloved classic. So
I do have a public announcement before we do watch this movie.
Right.
If you go to Disney Plus and click on A Muppet Christmas Carol, it defaults to an abridged version of the film. To watch the full movie, you need to go to the extras, and in the extras is the full movie.
Do I have to watch the full movie?
What are you talking about? It's the movie.
All right.
Yes, you have to watch the full movie. If I watched 4 versions of Justice League, you have to watch the full movie of the Muppets.
I did not ask you to watch all 4 versions. You chose to do that. Same way you chose to watch 2 Mission Impossibles instead of 1 because you got the title wrong.
That wasn't a choice. That was a plain mistake.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening and watching to Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. We will see you next week for The Muppet Christmas Carol.
Bye.